Hello there, welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. My name is Daniel, and I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and together we're going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year. We read a little bit every day. The traditional weekly Torah portion readings and the traditional readings. We're on the fifth reading for this week, which is Genesis 34:1 through, get closer, Genesis 34:1, Genesis 35:11. And I'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation. And Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom... Wait, hold on here. Do I have my sound? Yeah, sound looks good. Okay. And Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to go sing among the daughters of the land. And Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the land, saw her, and took her, and lay with her, and abused her. And his very self clung to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman, and he spoke to the young woman's heart. And Shechem said to Hamor his father, saying, Take me this girl as wife. When Jacob had heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter, and his sons were with his livestock in the field, and Jacob held his peace till they came. And Hamor, Shechem's father, came out to Jacob to speak with him. Jacob's son had come in from the field when they heard, and the men were very pained, for they were incensed, for he had done a scurrilous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, such as ought not to be done. And Hamor spoke to them, saying, Shechem, my son, his very self longs for your daughter. Pray, give him to her as wife, and ally with us by marriage. Your daughters you will give to us, and our daughters take for yourselves. And among us you will settle, and the land is before you. Settle and go about it, and take holdings in it. And Shechem said to her father and to her brothers, Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Name me, however, much bride price and clan gift. I will give what you say to me, and give the young woman as wife. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and they spoke as they did because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said to them, We cannot do such a thing, to give our sister to a man who has a foreskin, as that is a disgrace for us. Only in this way may we agree to you, if you will be like us, every male to be circumcised. Then we can give our daughters to you, and your daughters we can take for ourselves, and we can settle among you and become one folk. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, we will take our daughter and go. And their words seemed good in the eyes of Hamor and in the eyes of Shechem son of Hamor. And the lad lost no time in doing the thing, for he wanted Jacob's daughter, and he was most highly regarded of all his father's house. And Hamor with Shechem his son came to the gate of their town, and they spoke to their townsmen, saying, These men come in peace to us. Let them settle in the land and go about it, for the land, look, is ample before them. Their daughters we shall take us as wives, and our daughters we shall give to them. Only in this way will the men agree to us, to settle with us to be one folk, if every male of us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Their possession and livestock and all their cattle, will they not be ours, if only we agree to them, and they settle among us? And all who sallied forth from the gate of his town listened to Hamor and to Shechem his son, and every male was circumcised, all who sallied forth from the gate of his town. And it happened on the third day, while they were herding, that Jacob's two sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took each his sword, and came upon the city unopposed, and they killed every male. And Hamor and Shechem his son they killed by the edge of the sword, and they took Dinah from the house of Shechem, and went out. Jacob's son came upon the slain and looted the town, for they had defiled their sister. Their sheep and their cattle and their donkeys, what was in the town and in the field they took, and all their wealth, and all their young ones and their wives they took captive, and they looted everything in their houses. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You have stirred up trouble for me, making me stink among the land's inhabitants, among Canaanite and Perizzite, when I am a handful of men. If they gather against me and strike me, I shall be destroyed, I and my household. And they said, Like a whore should our sister be treated? Hold on, I think there's a little bit more. 35:11, yeah. And God said to Jacob, Rise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from Esau your brother. And Jacob said to his household, and to all who were with him, Put away the alien gods that are in your midst, and cleanse yourselves, and change your garments. And let us rise, and go up to Bethel, and I shall make an altar there to the God who answered me on the day of my distress, and who was with me on the day that I went. And they gave Jacob all the alien gods that were in their hands and the rings that were in their ears. And Jacob buried them under the terebinth that is by Shechem. And they journeyed onward, and the terror of God was upon the towns around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people who were with him. And he built there an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, for there God was revealed to him when he fled from his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under Bethel under the oak, and its name was called Alon Bakuth. And God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. And God said to him, Your name Jacob, nor no longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. And he called his name Israel. And God said to him, I am El Shaddai, be fruitful and multiply. A nation, an assembly of nations shall stir from you, and kings shall come forth from your loins. All right, quite a packed little section here, beginning with a rather horrific story of conflict.
I do need to make a correction.
Uh-oh.
There's the Hittites and there's the Hivites or the Hivites.
Yes.
So Abraham bought his land from the Hittites, and Jacob bought his land from the Hivites. I do apologize.
No worries
for that, and I don't know if we can edit it out of the earlier.
It's okay. Just, yeah.
All right. So you see that when I make a mistake, I correct it.
Yes. So, and if you ever notice a mistake, comment below because we will correct it.
Right. So we'll see.
Please do. We love being corrected.
My son loves being corrected anyway.
I like being accurate, and that requires being being corrected.
Yes,
because I am not 100% accurate.
Right. So anyway, that being said, we'll get back now to this drama here.
Something. Quite a story.
I
right?
don't think that she necessarily, was wrong in trying to interact that way. Some people I think that she shouldn't have been socializing with him or whatever. I don't know if that's. I think maybe she was just trying to be friendly, or maybe she should have had escorts with her. I mean, perhaps it is, a woman. That's a good point. In those days, women really shouldn't be going around unescorted in that culture. Even to this day, for example, in Saudi Arabia, women have to go out. I think with a relative, a male relative. They're just not on their own, or with other women maybe. But in the Middle East, an unescorted woman is looking for trouble, even now. So in that sense, if she just went on her own,
yeah,
it was not wise.
Right. I mean, certainly you never want to have the whole, somebody brought something as horrific as this on themselves.
No.
And that would be a very incorrect interpretation. However, that being said, there does seem to be a bit of a parallel going on here, because you have her seeing the daughters of the land, and then he sees her and he seizes her. So perhaps it wasn't the best idea. Not that it at all merited, this happening, but perhaps this is a situation where she probably shouldn't have been interacting with these people, and it just goes incredibly horrifically. It is interesting too that it goes out of its way to be very clear about it, because I mean the way Robert Alter translates it, took her and lay with her and abused her, as if taking by force is not enough. It goes even further than that, just to be clear that this is actual rape. This is not just aggression. This is not just seduction. This is a literal assault.
But then he speaks kindly to her.
Right.
Yeah. So now he's trying.
I mean, that doesn't preclude the fact that perhaps the man did have some sort of connection to her, despite being a horrific person, right? I mean, I don't know. It's not necessarily clear whether or not because he immediately goes out and he circumcises himself, which is not the easiest thing to do as an adult, right? And he could have just been like, whatever, because it's almost like an out, right? So, and I mean, and it could be just he was that attractive, but that seems like a bit much for just that. It seems like he really did want to make a go of it. It's just obviously he's the wrong sort of person to associate with,
right.
with how horrifically abusive he was.
He got out of control, and then he backed. Then he realized that he needed to handle it differently. But he,
Well, I don't know if he realized it. He was kind of forced into it, but he was willing to go with it.
well, it says he spoke kindly to her from that point on. I guess he realized that, perhaps,
He spoke to the young woman's heart, you mean? Was the way Robert Alter
oh,
puts it.
I see. Oh, okay. He looks at it a little differently. That he's trying to maybe make up with her for what
Yeah.
he did.
hmm
Okay, I got out
I
of
mean, he could
control.
just be basically a serial abuser type who's very good at making mistakes and then
Yeah, that
trying to make you feel
yeah.
like it's kind of your fault or something. Like, he could just be an incredibly, horrific
And
person.
then there's more to it than that because there's a spiritual element here in the sense that these people, these Hivites, they actually want to mingle with Jacob's people, and
Yeah.
so there, in a way, it's kind of like the church is in its infancy, and here already there's a pressure to assimilate so early in the history of the church.
And
You know,
you have the culture where he's like he's the highest son, and look at the way he behaves himself. So it's not a ringing endorsement of what this group was like, right?
but anyway, later on, you find that Hivites realize that Israel's going to be the winner, and they're going to be exterminated if they stay in that land, and so they fake that they have that they're people who've journeyed from a far country, and they get Joshua to say he won't harm them, and so then they become servants in the temple, in the tabernacle, later on in the temple. Evidently, they're descendants, so they wind up having a relationship with Israel where they're living among Israel, and uh, they're serving Israel. This is of course much later, but it's interesting here. They're wanting to kind of assimilate and maybe absorb Jacob's family into their clan. Later on, and when the Israelites are strong,
hmm
then they they wind up in a servile position to Israel, but they have a relationship there too. It's very very interesting.
Yeah. Now it's curious to me what happens here timing wise because you have the way he translates it. Jacob heard what happened, and then it says he held his peace till they came. His sons, were in the livestock, and and then the rapist and his father come to speak to him, and then Jacob's sons speak to him, and it's like Jacob disappears. It's a little bit strange. The account to me doesn't make it clear how it was that Jacob wasn't there because Jacob wasn't there for the whole deception. I mean, maybe I guess he was there and he just listened to them, but I don't think he would have agreed to any of this. It seems like because the sons did it knowing that they weren't going to follow up with this, and I don't think Jacob would want to follow up with this. So it's kind of I'm a little bit confused as to the setting. Right? Was Jacob? Do you think Jacob was there? He's not mentioned that I see. I
Yeah,
thought
it's interesting.
he just kind of disappears.
He went out to Jacob to speak with him.
Right.
Um,
And then it says his sons were in the livestock, and then he held his peace till they came
does it say that he spoke with him? It just says he came to
out to
Jacob to
speak with
speak.
him. And then it says, and Jacob's sons had come in from the field,
So
and
maybe,
and then it says, and Hamar spoke with them. So it's like they intercepted it.
yeah, maybe they got there ahead of him and they said, "You can deal with us,"
Yeah,
And so he went. He felt like he could,
yeah,
and he just went from there.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the first. That's probably a better way to look at it. I was thinking that maybe Jacob was there and then went
Yeah, it
away.
just doesn't seem
I
like
I
he's
think they
there. Yeah,
probably he probably they probably just intercepted it
right.
and then maybe told him what had happened later, but not the whole story. See,
hmm
that's another complication. If they did this, Jacob would have said, "Well, what happened when Hamor came,"
Yeah,
and so on.
right.
And
And for those of you who like my business dealings concept, here's another example of whoever made the first offer is gonna
uh,
lose, which is why the person says that, I do whatever and I will give the young person. This is a mercenary type person. I don't know.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
sketchy.
because we don't know what would Jacob have said
Mm-mm.
when he came.
It just doesn't seem like it because they're going and they're like we can give our daughters to you and your daughters. It's like it's way beyond just you can have have Dinah, right? It's like
Yeah,
we're gonna intermingle as complete clans, which I can't imagine Jacob would be comfortable with. I mean, he was told by his parents specifically who he had to marry and all of that, and this is gonna get really messy because you're going to have this intermingling. Because ultimately, I mean, they end up killing all the men and taking the women, which I guess gets sucked into the to the mix, right? Is,
It is something to further look into. It seems that somehow Jacob was not aware of the arrangement that was made.
mm-mm.
Maybe they told him,
Well,
that
no,
he would come that he would speak to Jacob later. That
yeah,
that they told him that their father wasn't available. Maybe his father was
right,
out doing something,
right,
and so they said, well, we made a temporary. We told him something temporarily, and you can speak with him later or whatever. I don't know,
right,
but Jacob seemed like he didn't. He wasn't aware of this.
right.
Um,
But ultimately, I mean, when it says, they took the kids and the wives and all that, like that, this seems very chaotic. Like, what happened to all this? Is all just getting assimilated into Jacob's clan?
no, the other way around. They would. I'm pretty sure they were the majority here.
Jacob?
No, the Hivites. I mean, Jacob.
Yeah. So,
So they wanted to more or less to absorb Jacob's people into their.
right. But if they killed all the men and they took that, and there would have been a
Oh,
ton of people.
oh, I see. No, I don't think they necessarily were a huge number, but I think
Okay.
they were more than Jacob. But it wasn't necessarily you're talking about a huge number here.
Right, but even then, it's like they took the wives and then what? So all of Jacob's sons are now married to this random, or not, or whatever. They're all intermixing with this tribe.
They could have. They might have sold them off. They might
Mm.
have kept some. I mean, later on we see I think I don't know if their wives are mentioned always, but
Yeah. Well, the
they
next thing that you have
polygamy.
too is the whole put away the alien gods, right? So that could have been part of the reason why you have that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because they come in and then immediately they have to
Right.
cleanse themselves because these are a
Right.
bunch of pagan people.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and the way they have this reading set up, that's the next step, right? But it's like it just seems like a huge mess.
The
Like,
problem is how would Jacob have handled it?
hmm,
I don't know. I mean, he might have tried to negotiate in such a way
right,
to get the daughter back. I don't know what he. I mean, uh, we don't know how Jacob would have handled it. Whether he would have been willing to sacrifice his daughter to keep, to prevent bloodshed. It could be that if he had not been willing to give up his daughter, there might have
yeah,
been a war between the two groups. But
right,
I don't know. We don't know how he would have handled it.
right.
Um,
But again, it has the messiness of this ancestry, right? Because it
yeah,
says, wives and young ones, which let's say they had the children and they didn't whatever sell them off or whatever thing they would have done. They actually kept them as part of their group. That would mean they would have literally people getting sucked into their clan that had no genetic similarity to them whatsoever, which is just interesting. Just something to keep in mind. It doesn't, you know what I mean?
well, racial purity is not.
I know it's not, but I'm
Yeah,
just saying like the
yeah,
Bible refutes it over and over again, and I think
right.
it's
Yeah,
important. I think it's important to realize that,
yeah,
especially too with the whole ethnicity thing, because people really get
right,
up hung on that not only for racial purity but for commandment keeping or things like that, and it's just
right,
constantly you have mixing going on. It's just all over
right.
and over and again, you know.
And it is interesting that they would have been willing to go along with this, but I guess it's because the leader.
Well, he lies to them too, because they're deceptive, and then he's lying too,
How
because
is he lying?
because he says their possessions and livestock and all their cattle will they not be ours. That wasn't really part of the deal. He's overdoing it.
Well,
They never said that.
I
They
think
never said that that would be the
I
case.
think
All they said was, "We'll marry some of you. You'll marry some of us." They
well, I
didn't.
think what he's trying to say is we're going to absorb them into our community, and so we're going to, in effect, increase our wealth as they join us.
Hmm,
Their wealth combines with our wealth,
maybe.
and so on. They
But
become
again, okay. But either way, either it's deceptive or not. But obviously, that's the motivation. It's money.
yeah. There's a mercenary motive here. Yeah, right. And just like with Laban and all through the Abimelech, and
Yeah.
you see this all through the history of the patriarchs
Right.
that they're doing well,
Yeah.
and others want to get
Right.
make use of that,
Right.
benefit from it too.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, there's also the possibility, too, that this is one of those situations where every does not mean every. I know some people really get bent out of shape
No,
over
that's a
that,
good point.
but it could just be the people that were considered part of the problem or whatever, the inner circle of this high muckety muck, and things like that. Because the Bible will say things like that, and it's not meant to be taken as such. Like all of whoever came to visit, you know.
Okay, okay, and they
Because it says that they killed every male, and maybe every male is not really every male.
so
It
they
means specifically for the ones involved in the
and
situation.
came out and killed all the males.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to mean every last one.
right,
That is a good point.
right,
I mean, some of them may have out of it run away or
exactly,
yeah, etc. Right,
right.
right.
Well,
But they
whoever they had a grudge with
but
was
they did kill
right.
the
They
perpetrators.
killed the father and the son.
Right,
Yes.
and Dinah was there. He had never given up Dinah. So there's a certain. It's interesting, he kept her.
Uh huh.
He said he wanted her, but he held on to her,
Uh huh.
But so they were willing to do the circumcision though, but I guess they felt they were going to benefit from having this new wealthy clan, absorb and join with them. They felt it was a benefit to them to do it, and also to have these extra women,
Yeah.
that they could marry and all the rest of it. So they were willing to do it, but also because the ruler, in those days,
Yeah.
the ruler had quite a bit of authority.
Right. But you do have a good point though that the text doesn't make it clear towards until the end that she's basically been captive this whole time.
Yeah,
Because it's like, well, I want to marry her. And it's like, well, if you want to marry her, you got to do this. And he's like, okay, I will do this. But in the meantime, he's just acting like he's married to her. So it is a messy
well, yeah, he may
situation.
have left her alone after the first attack,
Yeah.
because
I-
he wanted to have a relationship with her family.
right.
He realized he'd blown it. He'd gone too far, too
Yeah.
fast.
And it
And
is interesting when Jacob criticizes them, and there's more for that later in the prophecies. He talks about this, their anger and stuff. But specifically in this situation, he's just more talking about the political implications more so than, um, that this was bad thing to do. This was unjust or something like that. And even then, though, I don't think he ever comes across like that. I don't know if that's ever really his opinion.
it's interesting. Yeah, he does say that, you've put us in danger,
Yes.
but you don't know what he would have done, how he
Hmm.
would have handled it. You just don't know. I
Right.
suppose there may be.
I mean, considering how he kowtowed to Esau, it does seem like that might have not may have figured out a more sneaky way of doing it. And Laban, he just seems like maybe he's a little bit more clever. I don't know. Like
Yeah,
he might have been able to figure out a way to kind of, I don't want to say connive his way out of it,
well,
but
it may be that if you want to get spiritual about it, maybe he felt like he could that with God's help there could be some way
right,
he could have got her out,
sure,
and they in effect took the
took the law into their own
took
hands.
the easy way in a sense,
Yeah,
rather than trying to do it with God's help. They just
right.
made their own decision. I don't know what Jacob would have done, but it could very well be that with God's help he might have been able to work something out.
Hmm.
And here you're right. He seems to think of it as a diplomatic mistake because now they're strangers in the
Right,
land and everybody's going to hate them.
right.
Although that didn't happen,
No,
fortunately.
yeah,
It was a possibility, but it didn't happen.
yeah,
And maybe it's because of what they say. Look at what they did to
yeah.
us.
And
But
he and one thing that comes to mind when I think of that, that's just getting a little bit more for the modern audience example, is that you can you can have a reaction to sin and horrific things and injustice, and you can react in a way that actually can bring harm upon the community, even if you might be able to justify that righteous anger stirring you up to something. So you
right.
do have to keep that in check. Now, I certainly am not proposing anybody here listening to this as some sort of vigilante or something like that. But even so, there's other kinds of vigilanteism, right? Like, like what are you posting on social media or what are you doing?
Right,
Sometimes
right.
you're just bringing more harm to the community, and it's
Right.
actually not. Even though you could say, "Well, what are you trying to let them get away with?" That's not really that's not always a good response.
Well, it is interesting. I am challenged by Jacob's condemnation of them later. I mean, here I can understand what he's saying. You know, your rash action could make things worse,
Uh-huh.
but later on, he really gets rough on them in Genesis 49.
Right.
However, it may be that he saw in them a certain personality where they couldn't be all together in one place as an ethnic group
Mm-hmm.
because they'd be at war with everybody,
Right.
and so he scatters them around. One minister compared them to spices, to hot spices. You don't pile them up in one place; you scatter them around the meal
Right.
to spice up the meal. And it is interesting that Levi eventually their scattering becomes a blessing. You know, Levi that was scattered originally because they were so violent. Later on, in Deuteronomy 33, they're scattered as the priestly class, the clerics
Mm-hmm.
and the educators and so on. So they are sort of salvaged in a way.
Right.
Simeon
And I mean, if you look at what what they're tasked to do, it's rather violent.
that's right. Yeah,
So it's channeled. It's kind of like what people say about certain personality types. They say there are people and they're prone to aggression, and they either can go into the military or the police, or they end up going off bad because you've got to channel it somewhere. And I'm not trying to be disparaging about people that do those things, that they're
right,
overly violent. That's not my point. My point is just you do have to channel those sort of things, right?
right.
You have tendencies, and it does make sense so that we kind of see that here in the narrative early on, that you have that tendency.
And what happened to Simeon was they were placed in a situation where they were surrounded by the tribe of Judah, so they were that would be in a sort of an inhibitor on them. You know, they were given territory within Judah, and so they became kind of assimilated in a certain way,
Hmm.
or Judah would have an influence on them to kind of maybe moderate the violent tendencies there.
Hmm.
Later on, though, Simeon moved away from its original location, wound up in other parts of the area, but that's for much later.
Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was it is interesting it goes out of its way to talk about Deborah and Rebecca's nurse,
Hmm.
because you never find out when Rebecca dies. It's never mentioned in the text, but that is. So it is kind of interesting that that's chosen versus Rebecca. And I don't have a great reason why. If you have a good reason why, let me know. Comment below. I just find that interesting because we find out when Sarah dies, we find out when Rachel dies, we never find out when Rebecca or Leah dies.
Well, in the case of Rebecca, Leah, that's a good question. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good point because with Rebecca,
Yeah.
you could think, well, maybe because of what her deceptive
Yeah.
approach there, maybe that's why.
Or he wasn't there, I
But
guess.
Leah,
Yeah.
it's truth, we don't hear about when Leah died either.
Nope. Yep.
It's interesting.
Yep. All right.
But
Well,
I'm glad. But you see the respect paid to Deborah. So that
yes.
here Deborah was a kind of nanny
Mm-hmm.
or helper or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
a maid, and yet she's dignified here. You know, doesn't say how old she was, but it does mention her by name having died.
Mm-hmm.
So respect is paid to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting. All right. Well, we're going to continue reading on. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell, call your friends, and we will see you tomorrow. Theoretically, anyway. All right.